My brother, at just 21, bought himself a luxury car on a loan without a single penny to his name. And now, my parents are insisting on using my college fund to bail him out. Furious doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. Betrayed? That's more like it. I'm an 18-year-old college student, just a couple of months into my first semester. My parents had always reassured me that I wouldn't need to stress about tuition, books, or even a part-time job. They had a college fund ready for me, a promise they had kept with my older brother. Fairness, I thought, was a given. But fairness, it turns out, seems to be subjective in this family. Let me introduce you to my brother, Tyler. He's 21 now, and I don't want to come across as envious, but it's hard not to notice the difference in how we're treated. Tyler has always had it better, easier. And to make it worse, he's never been the kind of person to make it easy for anyone else. Tyler pushes boundaries, seemingly for sport. Take, for example, the time in high school when he brought a beer can to class, popped it open, and guzzled it, all on a dare. Most people would call that reckless. Tyler? He called it just having fun. And what happened to him? A slap on the wrist, a couple of days suspension. At home, there were zero consequences. Instead of being grounded, he lounged around the house, gaming his way through his suspension while my parents chuckled at the antics. Now, if that had been me, I would have been grounded so long I'd forget what sunlight looked like. I'd have faced lectures, scoldings, and an endless string of consequences. But Tyler? He gets away with everything, always. I've tried to tell my parents how unfair this is. Every time, they brush it off, acting like I'm just some jealous little sister. And honestly, that reaction stings worse than any reprimand. So, I stopped trying. Over the years, I've taught myself to shrug it off, knowing nothing would ever change. But what happened a few days ago? That crossed every line. Just a few months ago, Tyler graduated from college. A couple of weeks before graduation, he decided to celebrate his 21st birthday in style with a luxury sports car. He had no job, no savings, and hadn't even finished school yet. But he had one thing, access to my dad's credit card. My dad had added Tyler as an authorized user years ago, so Tyler could waltz into a dealership and walk out with a car, all on a loan. When he video called the family to flaunt his new ride, I expected my parents to explode with anger. But instead, they looked proud, even supportive. It was ridiculous. The whole thing was completely impractical, but what could I say? Technically, it wasn't my money, so I congratulated him and let it go. Fast forward a few months. Tyler graduated, got a job with my uncle, and managed to pay the car installments for 2 months. But, just as I had predicted, he defaulted on the third payment. The call came in the middle of the night. My parents, panicked, explained the situation. I told them what seemed obvious: Tyler needed to surrender the car. There wasn't another way out. But instead of agreeing, my parents said something that floored me. This is his first car. It shouldn't have to end this way. I was stunned. Why were they even calling me? Did they expect me to solve this mess? I'm an 18-year-old college student. I'm not exactly a financial advisor. But as the conversation unfolded, the true intent became horrifyingly clear. Caught off guard by everything I had shared, he listened intently, his brows furrowed in a mix of concern and disbelief. He asked me to repeat some parts, almost as if he couldn't fathom how things had escalated to this point. "Are you absolutely sure this is how they've chosen to handle it?" he asked, his voice heavy with both sadness and anger. I nodded, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop streaming down my face. They said it wasn't my place to question them. That it's their money and they could do whatever they wanted with it. For a long moment, the room was filled with silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. My grandmother sat beside me, gently patting my back as she always did whenever I was upset as a child. She didn't say much, but her presence was comforting, steady. My grandfather finally broke the silence, his voice steady but firm. "This is not right," he said. "They made a commitment to you, and that's something that shouldn't be broken just because they made a poor financial decision with your brother. It's unfair." Hearing his validation brought a sense of relief, but it didn't solve anything. "What do I do now?" I whispered, feeling completely lost. "I can't just let my future fall apart like this. I've worked so hard for everything. It's not fair." We'll figure it out, he said, a resolute tone creeping into his voice. But first, you need to stop blaming yourself. This is not your fault. I nodded, though the knot in my chest refused to loosen. My grandmother, still quiet, finally spoke up. You're staying here as long as you need to, she said softly. We'll deal with the rest later. It felt like a lifeline had been thrown my way, even if the storm was still raging. The next steps were unclear, but for the first time in days, I didn't feel entirely alone in facing them. It all started with a tense confrontation. He was clearly upset by everything I had said, but his response surprised me. Without hesitation, he told me that I didn't need to worry about any of it. He assured me that I could return to college stress-free because they, my grandparents, would always have my back. That single statement gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in a long time. He even told me they'd take care of my college tuition if my parents couldn't follow through. His reassurance helped me calm down, and without a second thought, I blocked my parents and my brother. I had no intention of maintaining contact with them after everything they'd done. They had put me in an impossible situation, and forgiveness was out of the question. Last Saturday, I spent the day with my grandparents, enjoying the peace their company always brought. By Sunday evening, it was time to leave and head back to college. Thankfully, my campus is only an hour's drive from where both my parents and grandparents live, so traveling back and forth isn't a hassle. But when I returned to college, something strange started happening. My phone kept buzzing with calls and messages from my uncle. This was unusual. My uncle and I have a decent relationship, but we're not close. He never calls me like this. At first, I ignored the calls, assuming it was somehow connected to my parents. But as the calls kept coming, curiosity got the better of me. I finally answered, and what he told me was both irritating and predictable. Unblock your parents, he said firmly. They're really angry and need to talk to you. Apparently, my parents had been pestering him nonstop, begging him to convince me to get back in touch with them. He sounded fed up, and I couldn't blame him. Their constant nagging had driven him to involve himself in something that wasn't his problem. Reluctantly, I decided to call my parents to hear what they had to say. The moment they answered, they unleashed their anger on me. Their accusations came rapid fire, each one more absurd than the last. They claimed I had ruined their lives and turned my grandparents against them. They even said I was trying to get revenge on them for helping my brother. Jealousy? Revenge? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They accused me of being envious of my brother and letting that jealousy spiral into something ugly. I had no idea what they were even talking about. All I knew was that my grandparents had generously offered to help me with college tuition. How could they possibly have a problem with that? Then it all became clear. My grandparents had called my parents after I left and informed them that the money for my tuition would come out of their inheritance. If I needed anything else in the future, it would also come from the same source. Suddenly, everything made sense. My parents weren't angry because of my situation, they were furious because their future financial plans had been disrupted. I couldn't help but think the situation was perfectly fair. My grandparents were simply holding them accountable, just as they had done to me. But my parents couldn't see it that way. To them, I was the villain. You planned this, they said, practically fuming. You wanted to get back at us. I calmly told them they were wrong and that they deserved the consequences of their actions. Then, without hesitation, I hung up and blocked them again. That might have been the end of it, but my parents weren't ready to let go. They took to social media, posting about the situation and painting me as the ungrateful villain. Soon, I started hearing from other family members. Some were on my side, but others weren't. To my surprise, there were people calling me entitled, saying I should be more understanding. Entitled? Me? For years, my parents had promised to support me through college. I relied on that promise. If they had never made it, I would have planned accordingly and worked to cover my own expenses. Expecting them to fulfill their word isn't entitlement, it's accountability. And my brother? He bought a car he couldn't afford and had no plan to pay for it. Yet somehow, he's the one getting all the sympathy? The whole situation is baffling. I'm just trying to get through college and secure a stable future for myself. If anything, people should be supporting me. My grandparents have been my rock throughout this ordeal, constantly reassuring me that I've done nothing wrong. People don't know your side of the story, they tell me. But even with their encouragement, it's hard not to feel upset. Am I entitled for asking for help when my parents broke their promise? Update. After thinking it over, I've come to a conclusion. I don't feel guilty anymore. I did the right thing, and so did my grandparents. If anyone is in the wrong, it's my parents. As for my brother, I don't even blame him entirely. He's just reckless and thoughtless, but that's a result of how my parents raised him. They've always encouraged his impulsiveness, never holding him accountable for his actions. It's no wonder he thought buying that car was a good idea. I've been holding on to this for a while, not wanting to stir things up, but now, I feel like I need to say it. I need to clear the air, let it out, and hopefully, find some peace of mind. It's been eating at me for far too long. The guilt is there, yes, but the sense of relief that comes with the post being taken down, the one that tried to paint me as the villain, outweighs it. Because at the end of the day, I know they don't care about me. They never did. That's the hard truth I've had to come to terms with. It's almost like a punch to the gut, realizing that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally never really did. But that's the reality I have to face. And now, I'm considering cutting all ties again. Why? Because keeping them in my life only leaves the door open for more pain, more manipulation. They've already shown me who they are. It's time to lock that door shut for good. They've never been my family. Not truly. I have family now, the ones who've been there when it mattered, the ones who didn't leave me to drown. My grandparents are my family now. And I'm so thankful for them, for the love and stability they've given me when my own blood turned their back on me. Their support has made me feel seen, heard, and cared for. And for that, I am forever grateful. I want to thank you, all of you who've stuck by me, who've shown me kindness and support throughout this journey. Your words have meant more than you know. They've helped me feel less alone, less like I'm drowning in this situation. You have no idea how much that means. It's been a few months since I last shared an update, and I can say, honestly, that I'm in a much better place now. Back then, I was drowning. Mentally, emotionally, I was a wreck. And I didn't know how I was going to come out of it. But therapy helped. It helped me process the fact that I would never have the relationship I once dreamed of with my parents again. That dream was gone, shattered beyond repair. It was hard to accept that my home, the one I had known for years, was no longer a place I could return to. But my grandparents, they became my home. And while it stung at first, the more I distanced myself from my parents, the easier it became to find peace. This Thanksgiving, instead of spending time with my parents, I went back to my grandparents' place. The people who have stuck by me. The ones who've been my rock through all of this. It was comforting to learn that those who've had my back have also cut ties with my parents. And it's been a relief to see that they aren't worse off for it. The family is divided now. Some stand with my parents. Some, like me, stand with my grandparents. It's a messy situation, but at this point, it's not even about that anymore. They started this. They wanted to manipulate me, turn me against my grandparents. But the tides have shifted. My grandparents have made it clear that they'll be there for me, and not just in words, but in action. What they don't know yet is that everything will be mine. The inheritance, everything that was supposed to go to my parents, it's all coming to me. My grandparents have already changed their will, and they're keeping it quiet. They haven't told my parents yet, and they won't until it's too late. It's their way of making sure that if my parents ever do come crawling back, it'll be because they genuinely want to make amends, not because they want something from me. And you know what? I think it's fair. My grandparents didn't have to do that, but they did. And I am forever thankful. For the first time, I have the family I deserve, not the one I was born into. Maybe I'll never have the kind of relationship I imagined with my parents, but honestly, that's okay. I have real support now. True love. And that's enough.